with me. Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're opening the case file on one of the most misunderstood and, frankly, most dangerous psychological profiles in existence. We're dissecting the anatomy of the secondary psychopath. We're going to dig deep into the gritty, volatile, and terrifying reality of what actually happens when a human brain is pushed so far past its breaking point, it fundamentally rewires itself just to survive. Let's get into it.
Look, we need to shatter a popular illusion right out of the gate. Hollywood has completely lied to you. The movies have trained us to think psychopaths are these ice-cold, sterilized masterminds. You know the type, sophisticated villains feeling absolutely zero emotion as they sip fine wine and play 4D chess with their victims. But the scientific reality, the clinical truth, is far more dangerous. The secondary psychopath is not a frozen calculating machine. They are a boiling point of explosive rage. They are chaotic, unpredictable, and highly reactive.
The absolute biggest misconception out there is this idea that these individuals just lack feelings altogether. That is dead wrong. They don't lack feelings. In fact, it's the exact opposite. They feel everything, but they feel it at an absolute boiling point. We're talking crippling shame, sudden, blinding panic, and an explosive rage that detonates without a single second of warning. So it's not an absence of emotion. It's an overwhelming, unmanageable tidal wave of it that dictates their every single move.
Section 1. The boiling point. Let's look a little closer at this chaotic emotional reality.
Now, clinicians love to use heavy academic jargon. They'll throw around terms like affective volatility or chronic emotional dysregulation, but let's cut through the clinical speak. What you are actually dealing with is an emotional fuse that blows in milliseconds. That is the terrifying reality on the ground. You're dealing with an individual who can shift from perfectly calm to absolute destructive rage in the literal blink of an eye. The fuse is practically non-existent. There is no de-escalation period. By the time you even realize they are upset, the explosion has already leveled the room.
The psychological term for this specific trigger is hostile attribution bias. In plain English, it translates to a paranoia that treats an accidental look like an act of war. Seriously, if you accidentally bump into them in a hallway, or if your tone of voice drops just a fraction of a decibel, their brain doesn't process that as an innocent mistake. Their brain processes it as a direct, intentional, and malicious attack on their survival. And they are going to retaliate with a force designed to completely obliterate that perceived threat. Minor interpersonal slights just don't exist in their world. Everything, and I mean everything, is life or death.
Section 2. The origin of chaos. How does a human being get to this point of constant, volatile detonation?
As an investigator, as a profiler, you always have to ask the foundational question: where does the monster come from? Unlike primary psychopaths, who are largely believed to be born with genetic neurological deficits, basically coming out of the box lacking empathy, the secondary psychopath is made. They are forged in absolute fire.
Imagine growing up in a house where footsteps outside your door meant danger. We're moving past the dry clinical lists of adverse childhood experiences here. I really want you to feel the visceral reality of this trauma. These individuals were not born monsters. They were born as vulnerable kids into environments of severe abuse, neglect, and chronic instability. When the very people meant to protect you are the ones hunting you, your brain has to adapt, right? To survive a literal war zone, the child's mind weaponizes itself. The explosion, the rage, the paranoia, it's all a deeply ingrained defense mechanism meant to keep predators at bay.
Section 3. A Ferrari with broken brakes. Let's look under the hood at the neurobiology, because that psychological defense mechanism takes a severe physical toll on the machinery of the brain itself. Sure, the scientific literature goes on and on about the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the serotonergic system, and the HPA axis. But if you want to truly understand the core physical flaw driving their relentless chaos, you just need to grasp one concept: a Ferrari with broken brakes. Here is exactly how this biological failure stacks up. Step 1 is the amygdala. This is the primal fear and threat detection center of the brain. Because of their severe childhood trauma, the secondary psychopath's amygdala is like an engine permanently pinned to the red line. It is screaming, constantly dumping adrenaline and cortisol, telling them they are actively under attack. Then we have step 2, the prefrontal cortex. This is the logical, rational part of the brain that's supposed to regulate emotion and assess long-term consequences. But in the secondary psychopath, chronic trauma has literally damaged this area. The brake pads are completely snapped.
The absolute crucial point is this. You are dealing with a brain where the alarm system is hardwired on full blast and the physical off switch has been totally destroyed. In clinical terms, this is impaired prefrontal top-down inhibition. In the real world, it means they physically cannot stop themselves once they get triggered. The panic engine revs to maximum, and the mental brakes simply do not exist to slow the vehicle down before it crashes right through a brick wall.
And knowing this perfectly reframes their behavior. When they lash out, when they completely sabotage their own lives in a fit of rage, it's not some grand instrumental manipulation. They aren't playing 4D chess, they're panicking and burning bridges just to survive the next 10 minutes. It's a frantic, desperate, reactive lashing out driven by a broken biological alarm. They're drowning in perceived threats, swinging wildly just to keep their heads above water for a few more seconds, completely blind to the long-term devastation they leave in their wake.
Section 4, the Diagnostic Crosshairs. This brings us to the final phase of our case file. Why do these individuals fly under the radar until it's just too late?
Put your detective hat on for a moment, because this is where the danger truly hides in plain sight. The secondary psychopath sits right in the exact crosshairs of 3 distinct disorders: borderline personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, and complex PTSD. Regular folks, and honestly even some professionals, often mistake them for standard narcissists or borderline individuals who just struggle with their emotions. But look closely at how the traits overlap here. You have the deep trauma origins of CPTSD combined with the explosive, remorseless violence and rule-breaking of antisocial personality disorder. It's in this specific intersection where volatile trauma morphs into highly dangerous, destructive behavior. The damage is usually already done by the time anyone realizes they aren't dealing with a typical toxic personality, but rather a profoundly damaged and incredibly dangerous psychological profile.
Which leaves us with a rather chilling reality to confront today. I want you to really think about the people around you. We spend so much time looking out for the cold, calculating villains in the shadows, the ones those movies warned us about. But the science shows us a completely different truth. If the most dangerous minds aren't cold calculators, but terrified survivors panicking at the wheel, who in your life is secretly driving with broken brakes? Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Stay observant, stay safe, and I'll see you next time as we open the next file.